solve the case of Jack the Ripper. These are the top 5 things you need to know about Jack the Ripper, part 2. Okay, pause this video and go back and watch part 1 if you haven't. Welcome back. Well, here we are, Jack the Ripper part 2, and this time I'm gonna tell you who done did it. No, I'm not. Nobody knows that. Everyone knows that nobody knows that. In this episode, we're talking about the profile of Jack the Ripper and the suspects based on that profile. So last episode, I did numbers 5 through 3. This episode, I will do numbers 2 and 1. Number 2, styling and profiling. Jack the Ripper was probably a sociopath. Seems obvious maybe, but there's a strong distinction between sociopathy and psychopathy. Psychopathy would suggest that he didn't have the wherewithal to be fully responsible for his actions. But the Ripper's actions were smart and precise. He killed and dissected his victims in the streets of London, but no one ever saw the man. He worked super fast and clearly had a growing understanding of anatomy based on his later victims. Sociopaths generally see themselves as greater than, and anybody who isn't them should know just how dumb they are. We're all so dumb because we have feelings. Oh, dumb. Look at me, dumb with my heart. I love my mom, idiot. The scariest thing about a sociopath like the Ripper is that they blend right in. They don't bring excess attention to themselves and are generally highly revered in their communities. BTK was a family man and the president of his church's council. But here's the thing. There's also strong evidence to suggest that the Ripper is a psychopath. Dr. Thomas Bond, a London physician who examined the victim's autopsy and police reports after the murders in 1888, suggested the Ripper was a man of solitary habits, subject to periodic attacks of homicidal and erotic mania, and the character of mutilations possibly indicating satyriasis or uncontrollable sexual desire. Fun! Dr. Bond's assessment directly contradicted the police report that theorized the Ripper was a medical student or had medical training. They assumed he was a medical man because of the removal of organs, but spoiler alert, it's not that hard to remove an organ, especially from a dead person. No resistance. By my knowledge, the Ripper was a goddamn surgeon, but apparently, so I've been told, I'm not a doctor. Whatever. But Dr. Bond was just that, a doctor, and he said the Ripper's surgical skill was that of a butcher. Like he could identify the organs, but the method of removal was a little rough around the edges. And homicidal. As for his growing precision we see in his later victims, Dr. Bond suggests that that is just a simple case of practice makes perfect. See kids, don't give up on your dreams. That is bad advice from Rachel Evans. Number 1, suspects. There are hundreds of people named as the possible Ripper, but I'm picking my favorite 2 that represent the 2 types of killers the suspects are bucketed into: West End and East End. If you'll remember in my last episode, there are 2 trains of thought in the identity of Jack the Ripper. One thought is that Jack was a highfalutin West End a-hole who wanted to cleanse the streets of East London. The other idea is that he was a local to East End's Whitechapel who killed just for the fun of it. In the East corner, weighing 180 pounds and covered in his own filth, David Cohen! David Cohen was a poor, clinically insane Polish-Jewish immigrant. He was committed to the Colney Hatch Lunatic Asylum in December of 1888 and died in that asylum in October of 1889. He didn't even make it 10 months. Same with my last relationship. Interestingly enough, the name David Cohen is a pseudonym similar to that of John Doe. The name was given to him because he was an unidentified Jewish man upon committal. David Cohen fits the profile of the East End animalistic version of Jack almost perfectly. He was committed to the asylum just 1 month after the murder of Mary Kelly, the Ripper's final victim. Another interesting tie-in to the physical evidence is the Goulston Street Graffito, which I talked about in the last episode. The incredibly confusing message led police to believe that the attacks were carried out by a Jewish man. Or it meant nothing at all. Or it was just somebody who played with the victim's bloods and put it on the wall. Or we know nothing, and they knew nothing at the time, and we still know nothing. I'm talking myself into a tizzy. I'm having a mental breakdown, Jack. You're dead, and you're still driving me crazy. And the West End suspect is H.H. Holmes. Or H.H. Holmes. Okay, Okay, I love the story of H.H. Holmes, and I have an entire episode devoted to him. But I had to include this theory in this episode. Holmes doesn't necessarily make the most sense in the case for the Ripper, but it's so fun and I love it so much. H.H. Holmes was a serial killer who operated around the same time as Jack the Ripper. The loudest supporter of the H.H. Holmes Jack the Ripper theory is H.H. Holmes' own great-great-grandson, Jeff Mudgett. Jeff Mudgett has given lectures and even TED Talks on the subject, and TBH, he's a little thirsty for this to be true, which makes me wary of his argument, but I am a kind and giving soul, so let's dig into this, right, Jeffy Mudge Mudge? Holmes was a medical student in London during the times of the Whitechapel murders, which supports the high-end gentleman Jack or West End killer theory. In Mudgett's book Bloodlines, he suggests that H.H. Holmes was in London during the times of the Whitechapel murders, according to H.H. Holmes' diary. And yes, while he was in London, he exhumed dead bodies for profit, and yes, he went on to become America's first serial killer, but besides all that, we have his diary. Well, to be more specific, Jeff Mudgett has his diary. We've never seen it. The diaries describe training sessions between Holmes and his assistant. The man was instructed to murder prostitutes and mutilate their dead bodies in order to distract from Holmes' own murders. The little problem here is that Mudgett doesn't provide any of the diary entries. How are we supposed to believe you, buddy? But he does provide plenty of logical reasoning and proof that he is indeed Holmes' great-great-grandson. While that certainly grounds his argument, it's not enough to prove that Holmes was indeed Jack the Ripper, especially without these diary entries. It's more of a fun story than a feasible conclusion. And that's just it, y'all. There is no conclusion to this. The Ripper case is the coldest of cold cases, so why not just believe whatever's most fun for you? Honestly, the Ripper story is more legend than fact at this point, so might as well party with it, right, y'all? Yeah. I want to believe that H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper, so guess what? I believe it. Oh wait, I think we all just figured out how religion works. I'm religion now. Follow me. Dad? If you're looking for even more information on Jack the Ripper, I implore you to check out the last podcast on the left, 5-part series on Jack the Ripper. They do things I could never do, mainly talk for 7 hours. I could do that. I could for sure do that, yeah. Thanks so much for watching part 2 of Jack the Ripper. Please, if you haven't yet, go subscribe to our gaming channel, Slaytrix. It is so fun. I love it so much. Hold on, give me a second.